Happy Thanksgiving, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great time to be Astros fans. They just won another World Series, and we're going to do an episode where we list the top 22 things to be thankful for as an Astros fan.
That's right. 2022 was a great season, not only for the offense, but for the pitching, for Dusty Baker, and just the emergence of Jeremy Pena as a superstar on this roster. So we want to count down the 22 most amazing things to be thankful for in this edition of Locked On Astros. Let's go 22 to 11 right now.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Astros, your daily Astros podcast. Here are your hosts, Eric the Man Huysman and Brett H-Town Wheelhouse Chancey.
We are Locked On Houston Astros, and we hope that you join us for a daily Locked On Astros podcast. My name is Eric Huysman. Find me on Twitter at Eric Talk Stros. Find the show at Locked On Astros, your team every day. Brett, where can I find you at?
They can find me at H-Town Wheelhouse on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and Astros411 on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Always positive, always Stros.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. And guys, thank you for making Locked On Astros podcast your first listen every day. I know that we've had more than 1 million downloads and listens through both our audio and YouTube version. So we are very thankful for you as the listener. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. Go ahead and subscribe to us on YouTube and go ahead and give us a like while you're at it and make us your first listen on Apple, Odyssey, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. Go and check us out. But we want to go ahead and do a little special Thanksgiving edition to go ahead and talk about our favorite team, the Houston Astros. They won the World Series in 2022. So we thought we would go ahead and give you the top 22 things to be thankful for in 2022. And of course, some of them are going to be very obvious. And we kind of argued about order, and don't think of the order as like it's set in stone, but it's up for discussion. So that's part of what we like to do. We like to hear your thoughts. So go ahead and give us your thoughts. Is there anything that we missed? But we just wanted to do something special to fill your plate on this Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that's right. So what we're going to do is we're going to count backwards from 22 to, I believe, 12. And then the next episode, we're going to do 11 through 1. So number 22, you can't mention 2022 without the one of the things we are glad that happened. No offense, Jake, but the trading of Jake Odorizzi to the Atlanta Braves, the great salary dump, as we call it. You know how they call Kyle Riley Big Dumper? Can we call him Big Dumper?
Maybe, but the Astros are definitely really smart there. They're able to avoid having to do what the Braves did. The Braves had to trade Odorizzi away and basically pay the Rangers $10 million of his salary, which was $12.5 million. And so I think the Astros did a good job. Yes, they did get Will Smith. Will Smith did help them down the stretch, and he actually pitched better for the Astros than he did with the Braves, but he wasn't much of a factor in the playoffs. So no, it wasn't about Will Smith at all, but it was about getting rid of Odorizzi, because Odorizzi was one of Click's signings that he kind of did in a panic move, because Framber Valdez was, I think he had a hurt finger at the time. And so
Yes.
they weren't sure how many months he would be out. So they wouldn't have that depth option. And it was not a bad deal at the time, but they needed to part ways. There was just too much. Well, I'd rather be starting and he just was too controversial.
Yeah, it wasn't a good fit, and he needed to go somewhere else. The Astros needed a way to dump his salary. Now, that's a great way to start. Let's go to number 21. And again, these aren't necessarily with these players that we like and the guys that are bearing me the H. We're not saying that they're 21 because they're not great to us, but this is definitely something that was key. Number 21, we have Lance McCullers avoiding surgery in the offseason so he could pitch. Lance McCullers hoisting the World Series trophy there if you're watching.
Yeah, Lance McCullers got four. He was 4-2 in the regular season, 47 innings. He had 50 strikeouts with a 2.27 ERA. And he did have some moments in the postseason. The game against the game against in the World Series was not good, but he did help the Astros staff down the stretch and allow them to kind of have a 6-man rotation, 7-man rotation at times. So him coming back was a big piece. And even though he didn't pitch great, the name Lance McCullers with his history in the playoffs is that really scares the other team.
Yeah, definitely. But I think with someone like Lance McCullers with this bullpen, and we'll talk about that later with Justin Verlander, you have to have somebody anchoring the bullpen and anchoring the starters. And when Brent Strom left this team, Eric, everybody wondered what would happen to this pitching staff. And we got none other than Josh Miller and Bill Murphy as a pitching coach duo that really put this team at the top of the list, Eric. Josh Miller and again, Bill Murphy has done a phenomenal job. And when they left, Brent Strom did say, you know what, I'm leaving you guys in good hands. And if I don't leave, they were going to get poached and someone was going to cherry pick them to another club. So I'm glad to have them on board.
Yeah, and I think that from what I remember, Miller was the guy that did most of the trips to the mound, and he seemed to be the point man of talking to the pitchers. And if you look at what the Astros did, we'll talk about it in a second, but the Astros had one of the best pitching staff in baseball, and the offense was streaky at times. Yeah, they were good, but then there's times where they could barely score any runs, and you had a pitching staff that just dominated, and the bullpen was one of the best in baseball. We'll talk about that in a second as well. But yeah, to not see a difference, you've got to be thankful for that, because Brent Strom was really good at what he did. For there to be a seamless transition into the new regime, that was great.
That was great. And I love how they fit in. And they didn't just fit in because they're good, they're fit in because they've been here. And that's something that Jim Crane definitely needs to be lauded for, because at the end of the day, it's about keeping the gang together that gets you there. All right. So we move on to what is it? What are we at? Are we already at, are we at 19 or 20 right now?
We are at number 19.
Number 19, Kyle Tucker wins the Gold Glove. And look at that. Got the picture of him if you're watching. He's catching the ball that nearly went out of the ballpark right at the HEB sign. But we've seen him make a number of stabs. He was appropriately the last guy to touch a baseball in a World Series. He got the final out on the pop fly foul ball over the first base side. And Kyle Tucker, what can you say about Kyle Tucker, Eric? Not just offensively, but defensively, great value with his glove and his arm.
I know a lot of people when he first came up thought he looked lazy on defense, but I think what he's done, he's grown as a player, and he's the guy out there that would be like, okay, we forget about George Springer. We don't see much of a difference. George Springer was a great right fielder. Springer could play center field, yes, but also I just think that Kyle Tucker is just coming into his own, and the Astros relied so heavily on their pitching staff, and they needed a guy out there in right field with the good arm he had to throw out runners at the plate and just to keep the runners guessing. And you don't run on Kyle Tucker unless you absolutely have to.
Exactly. He has got an absolute cannon. And we move up the list. And I really believe that this pitching staff, Eric, we look at the pitching staff as a whole, and it's hard to just name or label one guy. And we'll talk about him more individually here in a second. But, Framber Valdez is really has become one of the aces, and none other than someone like Justin Verlander, who also was a key proponent to this Astros pitching staff. The Houston Astros saw Martin Maldonado back there helping them out in this pitching staff, literally from beginning to end, no matter what starter was in there. Because we talked about this on the show, a use of 9 starters overall. Brandon Bielak actually being one of those. And Brandon Bielak actually pitching some games where he went several innings and saved the bullpen. There's a lot to be said about the little things like that make a difference in a 162 game season.
Yeah, and I really regret deleting Jake Odorizzi's picture because we could have totally put it in this moment. But there's definitely a whole bunch of relievers that can fit into this picture right now. I mean, it's not just about the starters, but the bullpen. The bullpen became Dusty Baker's most valuable weapon in the playoffs, and he really took advantage of it. And to the point where Ryan Stanek, who had one of the best ERAs in the regular season of recent note, and he didn't even get a sniff hardly in the playoffs. And we're going to talk about another guy that kind of came out of nowhere in a little bit, but it just was hard to really bet on the bullpen doing as good as they did. But you can say all you want about James Click, but he did a great job assembling this bullpen. And we'll talk about some of the other stuff in a second. But let's talk a little bit about BetOnline. And this episode is brought to you by BetOnline.
BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. We've got it all on BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those as well. You can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Whether you're betting on the United States to get out of pool play or you're betting on the Houston Astros to land Justin Verlander, remember, BetOnline is where the game starts.
Alrighty, so we're going to go ahead and move on to number 17. And this could actually be more up the list, but I think that this is something that definitely is a big plus for the Astros. It's a re-emergence of Jose Altuve's bat. In the past couple seasons, he's been good, but he just hasn't been great. But we saw him kind of not duplicate what he did in 2017, but we saw him kind of get back up to that level. And I know he's getting a little bit older, but it's good to know that he's still he's trying to be that guy. And I know that for the 2 years before this, he had to deal with a lot of, because he is the center of discussion when it comes to the cheating scandal and everything. So
Right.
every time he goes somewhere, people are booing him, and sometimes he responds by hitting a leadoff home run and kind of quiets the crowd and everything. But Altuve rebounding in 2022 was a big reason for the Astros being successful.
A massive part of that. And his goal this year was to hit an OPS over 900, which he achieved with the 920 OPS. He hit over 300, and he wasn't focused on hitting home runs like he had been in the past. I mean, in the past, to his credit, if he focused on power, he's still hit for average. I mean, this is one of the most prolific hitters we've seen, probably in this generation. Mike Trout is second to him, and he's got the most hits in Major League Baseball since 2011. The
Yeah.
leader of this team on and off the field. A great thing to see him reemerge. You know what? I like what good.
Before we move on, we can't forget about the fact that he had 18 stolen bases. This is something
Oh,
that he's kind of went away from with his knee issues and everything. For him to come back with this type of speed, that's great.
that's an excellent catch. I love this. Number 16. Now, you would have said, okay, Brett, what is number 16 on this list? I wouldn't have picked this, but I like it. Scott Service pitching Robbie Ray versus Yordan Alvarez in the ALDS. What a gift. I guess, is he the gift that keeps on giving? Of course, we put up the picture of Yordan hitting this 3-run bomb in the World Series here. But I was at that game, Eric, ALDS game 1, and watching him hit that walk-off, because I can tell you, we just got through speaking about Altuve. When Jose Altuve strikes out in the 9th inning and you have 2 outs, it's not that you don't trust Jeremy Pena to get on base. It's that your leader just struck out, and he's been your clutch guy against Chapman, against the Yankees, against many clubs, right? So when he strikes out, hope kind of goes out the window. And I remember I almost
Right.
left because I was like, it's over. It's like, you know what? I'm going to stay. I believe in my guys. Jordan's right there on deck. Little did I know. Thank you, Scott Service. Robbie Ray piped the ball in the inside part of the plate. That was a moonshot.
And I know Alvarez had two other. I mean, one of them wasn't really a walk off, but it was the game winning one in the World Series in Game 6. But he had another kind of game winning one in Game 2 of the ALDS as well. Then his back kind of cooled off a little bit. But yeah, that one specifically just came to mind just because in that situation, why would you bring in a starter and just to do that. So it just was kind of a weird situation. So at number 15, we have Chas McCormick's glove. This is something that a lot of people will probably say, well, why are you focused on Chas McCormick's glove? I think it's because of the fact that he was just he was just great with the glove, and Dusty Baker wasn't really ready to make him the center fielder, but he did in the World Series and in playoffs when it needed him the most. So I think the emergence of Chas McCormick as a whole, not just as a defender, but as a hitter, as somebody that the Astros could finally trust, because we've had to have the whole situation where all season you had the people with saying, who's the center fielder? Is it Dubon? Is it Jake Myers? James Click wanted to be Jake Myers. So it's just good to see the situation. So that was number 15. Number 14 is going to be, I don't know if he has a picture up here, but Michael Brantley. Michael Brantley winning. I don't know. That's not Michael Brantley, but these pictures. But Michael Brantley definitely, he didn't play in the playoffs, but he made his presence known in the playoffs because he kind of went out there after the Astros got embarrassed in Game 3 in Philadelphia, and he said, "Guys, we can't do this. We got to play this good baseball. We've got to go out there and beat them. We are better than them, and we just got to go out there and take care of business." And I think that's what you need on a team like this. Michael Brantley was a valuable asset. Yes, you would love to have him at DH, but he was hurt, but he made his presence felt on this in the playoffs. So Michael Brantley is a big plus on this team, and so even without playing, you knew he was there. And even when he came back finally to the field after recovering from his injury, you can tell that the players were like, "Oh, Uncle Mike is back. This is cool." So he has a presence around this Astros locker room, same as Yuli Gurriel. And I didn't put Yuli Gurriel heating up in the playoffs, but maybe I should have. Anyway, number 13 is the Astros' strong back end of the bullpen, which is the best in baseball. And if you think about who the Astros had there, they had Ryan Presley. By the way, something I wanted to add, but we ran out of space, was Ryan Presley's intro song, everything with all the sound, the light show. That's just awesome. But not just Presley, but then you had Abreu, you had Montero, you had Hector Neris, you had Stanek, and then you had Hunter Brown at the end. You had a back end of the bullpen that other teams are very envious of. And it led to one of the best ERAs in postseason history and one of the best ERAs in the regular season. So the Astros were able to take some starters out early because they're like, okay, well, we got a good bullpen, so we're fine. So we could take care of the situation. So I think that if you're talking about somebody like Montero or Stanek, you can trust these guys to do whatever you need them to do. So it's just great to have those guys on your team versus the other side. And there's a reason why Jim Crane opened up the checkbook to re-sign Montero this last offseason. So the next one would be a personal favorite of mine. This would be actually up a lot higher if I didn't have some other things. We'll talk about some of the other ones later. But this is the final one of this show. And it's probably one of the bigger keys to 2022. Dusty Baker went to this guy above anybody else in the playoffs. And that was the emergence of Bryan Abreu. Abreu was just this guy that a couple years ago didn't even make spring training because he came overweight and out of shape. And they just, it took him a while to discover his form. But the Astros knew eventually he would become this, and he became a valuable weapon for Dusty Baker. And so definitely we'll see what happens in this situation. But having Bryan Abreu have the season he did, it wasn't just in the postseason, but in the regular season. Where is it? He just was so dominant, and he was just one of your big pieces. Where is he? I can't see his name right here on my list, but he just had a great overall season. And not only that, but Seth Martinez and all the other guys that came up throughout the year. It's just great to see the Astros bullpen come together. And a big weapon was Bryan Abreu. So that's all we got for this episode. We did the first 11 things to be thankful for in 2022. What will make the list for the next one? And we'll be back later to go ahead and discuss those. My name is Eric Huysman. You can find me at Eric Talk Astros. You can find the show at Locked On Astros. And Brett, you can find him at H-Town Wheelhouse. And happy Thanksgiving, and be on the watch out for part 2. And don't forget to go subscribe to us on YouTube and make us your first listen every day. So we'll see you later. And once again, happy Thanksgiving and go Astros.